Thank you very much for having me. 안녕하세요. It is great to be here in Korea, and I want to thank Renee, our Chief Marketing Officer, for a great start. And what I'd like to do is build on a lot of the topics that Renee talked about. I'd like to also thank my translator in the back for the pain I am about to cause them and the amount of work they are going to have to do. This is a different type of presentation, and my goal today is that you will learn something and hopefully have some questions. If you would like a copy of this presentation, I will absolutely make it available to you. So with that, let's get started, and I assure you there's no pressure for me, even though our Chief Marketing Officer is sitting in the front row. So what I'd like to do is start with a quick introduction. Sometimes we all go to speeches and seminars like this, but you don't even know who's presenting and who you're talking to. So a quick background on me. I'm the head of systems engineering for Asia Pacific at Palo Alto Networks. I'm originally from the United States and have been living in Hong Kong for about 4 years. About 2 months ago, I relocated to Australia, which turns out to be an incredibly expensive place to live and extremely hard to travel from. Outside of work, I do something crazy called triathlons, which is not a Western sport. If you look in the middle of that picture, that's the Korea Ironman triathlon, which I participated in just last year. A great event in Central Park here in Seoul, well run and well organized. So thank you very much to everyone in Korea for a job well done on that event. I've been focused on security since 1996 and still learning every day. I do have some experience in the market and have worked for a few different companies, and it's been very interesting to see the evolution of technology as I've gone from a company like Check Point to NetScreen to Juniper and now Palo Alto Networks, and to learn how the different vendors have evolved over time and how some of the vendors have not evolved over time. That's the most interesting part of working for different vendors, is you get to see how people keep up with the adoption of technology and the changes. Because the way we were selling security in 1998 and the way you were buying security in 1998 is completely different to now. Even from 5 years ago, it's different than now. So with that, let's get started, right? A lot of people ask me, how much does your product cost? Every time we meet with a customer, they ask, how much does your product cost? My response is always the same. What are you trying to protect? How much would you spend if your life depended on it? Would 100,000 US be too much? Or 1 million? Or 10 million? Right? We're going to talk about the cost of it, but I can guarantee you that there's a company called Bangladesh Bank that would have paid a lot of money to protect the loss of 81 million US dollars. And I'm going to show you what happened there. And this is not a presentation about fear. This is an educational presentation. So when we talk about what you're trying to protect, is it a gas pipeline? Is it your electrical grid? What about the water supply of Korea? Now, obviously, this picture is near and dear to me because I live in Hong Kong and have for 4 years. But think if the Incheon airport was attacked, how would that affect life in Korea? It would be a big deal. This is the critical infrastructure of any country, is the transportation system of that country. But what about the financial infrastructure? I spend a lot of time talking to CFOs, CIOs and CSOs around Asia Pacific, and financial services companies are one of the biggest companies that want to have discussions. So for anyone in the financial services industry, I'm going to show you a lot of data today related to the financial services industry. Now, a minute ago, we talked about Bangladesh Bank. And in case you don't know what happened this year here, I want to show you something. Earlier this year, about $81 million was taken from Bangladesh Bank. But the interesting part is how it happened. Because the money did not go directly to an attacker. The money went through another bank in the Philippines, and you can look at all this, it's public. But think about this. The bank in the Philippines had to have been under attack before the bank in Bangladesh could be successfully breached. And that's why when you're doing security, sometimes what you think is the actual target of a breach is not the target. It's a secondary target. So you have to understand what you're trying to protect and what the ultimate goal of someone might be. And here you can see that although they did get $81 million, the actual attack was for 950, almost $1 billion. And it was just because of an error on the attacker's part that they didn't get more. That's what's interesting, right? Now, I can assure you, the Bank of Bangladesh could have spent a lot less than $81 million to protect what is a critical infrastructure for that country. So quickly, what is the cost of a breach, right? Let's look at something trivial, like the cost of a stamp of postage. In Australia, a stamp might be $1 Australian, right? In Hong Kong, 2.9, 37 cents US. Korea, about 270 Korean won. And in the US, about 46 cents. What if you had to notify every customer you have that you've been breached? Just notify them by mail. And you had 1 million customers, or 10 million. What would it cost you just to notify them by mail, right? If you're attacked, who is the designated spokesperson of your company? Have you identified that person? Do you know who's going to talk to the media if someone needs to? Here's another question for you. What if your email system has been compromised? How do you contact every employee in your company if you have no email? Have you thought about that? What if you're worldwide? What if you have 100,000 employees around the world and you need to contact all of them? How do you do it? Companies have not thought about this. These are the things you should think about when you think about security. Not just a product that you can buy, but the process surrounding security. So let's think about who are we talking to about cybersecurity and who's concerned about cybersecurity? I think the answer could surprise you. Everyone knows that the board is talking about it, right? CXOs. But I can assure you, all across Asia, because I live in Asia, this is all I do. I don't do anything with Europe or America. All across Asia, this is what's happening. Australia launched a new cybersecurity strategy. Singapore has launched a cybersecurity strategy. The Prime Minister of Singapore came to a conference called GovWare this year, about a month or two ago, and gave the opening speech at GovWare to show how committed Singapore is to cybersecurity. You saw Renee reference President Obama and what the US is doing, and Renee also talked about the United States Cyber Command, which is a military operation to protect against cyber attacks. This is happening everywhere across Asia. Countries and governments are doing just this, and I could give you many examples of that, but obviously governments like to keep what they're doing fairly private if you're talking about protecting the country and the infrastructure. Now let me give you a different view. When I was at GovWare in Singapore, I met this guy. His name is Mike McConnell. He was the director of NSA and national intelligence in the US. He told me governments are good at two things, and only two things: doing nothing and overreacting. Now, he's a cynic. He doesn't believe governments can move fast enough. And I think some people would agree that governments don't move fast, but my message here today is that when you look at what's happening around Asia, including in Korea with the Korea Internet and Security Agency, governments are taking action. So I disagree with this person. He had a very interesting speech, but I think he's wrong. I think traditionally governments have been slow, but now I believe that governments are reacting and moving as quick as they can. Let me give you some more examples. This is a picture of my team in Hong Kong. We just met with the police force of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has their own cybersecurity and technology crime bureau. Even though Hong Kong is governed by China, they are doing their own cybersecurity in Hong Kong. This is a financial services event in Hong Kong. These are the leaders of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and financial institutions of Hong Kong getting together to talk about cybersecurity. They put all of the important people right up at the front for the picture, which is why I'm in the very back row in the middle. But here in Korea, you can see that the Korean government and the Korean Internet Security Agency, they are also taking action. This is directly from the website in Korea, and this is what is happening right here in Korea from the government protecting the critical infrastructure and the citizens of Korea. So let's move into a real example, and I want to share with you some fairly amusing examples, right? So these are examples of government and military, but what about private companies, right? One of the world's largest companies is Berkshire Hathaway. It's a Western company, but it's a conglomerate. It owns many companies. And this is the CEO. His name is Warren Buffett. Now, you wouldn't expect a guy like this to be a security guy or a technology guy. He made his money on owning railroads and insurance companies and old companies. But every year, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, they release a letter to their shareholders. It's public. You can download it on the internet. And they list their top 7 priorities. And number 4, number 4, if you look at it, it says that one of the main threats that they face is a cyber, biological, nuclear, or chemical attack on the United States. So right here, he is calling out that a cyber attack is one of the number 1 things they worry about. And this is coming from a very traditional person who is not involved in technology at all. This is how the world has changed, right? Every company is thinking about how do you protect your assets or your intellectual property. Now, CXOs, they also have some complaints. And Renee talked about this specifically. They complain that they've spent a lot of money, but they don't know if they're protected. And when a company has spent $1 million or $10 million US, and they can't tell the board of directors that they're protected, that's bad. So let me give you an example. We deliver a report to customers that shows them what is going on in their network. Imagine we could tell you all of the SaaS applications in your network. And imagine if we could tell you the exact application, the bandwidth it's using, as well as whether or not it's an official or unofficial application in your network. We can actually work with your IT department and show you exactly what is happening in your network for free. And we can do this in 1 week. We'll even tell you the users and what applications they are using. Because security is not just about an application. It's about a user, right? And again, we can break it down into the most detailed information you can think of. If you let us integrate our platform into your network, we will provide extreme detail for you. Now, I also like to have a little bit of a laugh when I'm working with customers, because sometimes when we go into a network, we find ridiculous things happening. So I would ask everyone here, do you really know what's happening in your network at work? Do you actually know what your employees are doing? Because I do. And I can assure you that most people that run a network do not. Let me give you an example. This report was done in October, very recently, right? It took us about 7 days to generate this information. And we can create very nice graphs and have an executive report. But let's dig deeper, right? Let's look at this over here. At this company, did you know that YouTube, HTTP video, and Facebook video are almost 100 gigs of traffic in 7 days? Now think about that. Do you think this company, their primary business is having employees watch video during the day? I can guarantee you that is not the primary business of this customer. Now up here, do I have a laser? You can't see it. Up here, one of the arrows is pointing to a website called Tinder. Tinder is a dating website where you swipe right or swipe left if you like the person you see on the screen. That website is one of the top websites being accessed in this company for social networking during work hours. This is the kind of data that we find when we go and do an analysis with a company, right? Here's another one. BitTorrent. Over 5 gigs of BitTorrent in 7 days. BitTorrent is not an official application that this company needs to run their business. So when you look at this, imagine the conversation we had with the chief information officer and the CEO at this company about how we can help them with their business and what their employees are actually doing. So now that you've seen that, what makes someone change? Think about change. Some cultures are very resistant to change. Most people are actually very resistant to change. And we call this a forcing function, which is something that makes people change, right? Because most people would rather fail than change. Now, let's go back and talk about governments when we talk about change. How fast can the US government move? Now, I'm an American. I have the right to make fun of the US government. So let's have some fun with the US government, right? When the US government wants to make a change, they can put in a directive called a presidential policy directive. And we're going to come back to this in just a minute. But they can implement that, and that can make a change. So let's look at an event in US history that could cause the US to make a change. How about September 11th, 2001? This is a big date. This is when the United States had a terrorist attack. But what you don't know is that the advisors to the President of the United States got together and they told the President that although this was a very bad physical attack on the United States, if someone would have attacked the financial infrastructure, it actually would have been much worse. And that was never publicly shared, that commentary. Even after that, it took until 2016 for some legislation to come into effect, 15 years later. But there was one thing that happened before it. In 2011, a presidential policy directive went into effect in the United States, PPD number 8. And that actually started the framework of cybersecurity in the United States. So what happened with that? Here's what's interesting. Less than 1 week ago, a new cybersecurity report for the United States came out, and it is built upon PPD 8, or Presidential Policy Directive 8. So this shows you, although even the US government, they do not move fast, they are now taking action. This is a public report. You can download this off the internet, and this is the United States guide now on national cybersecurity. So again, governments can move slow, but they are taking action. Another thing Renee talked about was, what are the laws across Asia Pacific? In Korea, do you know if a breach happens, do you have to publicly report it? Most people do not know this. And I can tell you across Asia Pacific, the laws of every country are wildly different. Some countries, actually, you have to report a breach. Other countries have no law at all. Let me show you. Korea, after they had an attack, which you may be familiar with, which was called Dark Seoul, legislation has started to change in Korea, right? So here's a comparison. This is the breach notification law of South Korea next to the breach notification laws of the United States. South Korea is actually doing very well in their breach notification laws. So let's compare that. What about Hong Kong and Singapore? The laws are very minimal. Actually, in Singapore, there's very few laws, but that's changing very rapidly, as well as Australia, too. What about a place like Indonesia versus the United States, right? And last, how about Thailand? This is Thailand compared to South Korea. So again, South Korea is now moving fast and implementing cybersecurity laws to protect what is going on to the citizens and the critical infrastructure of South Korea. Now I want to move into a concept of trust. And Renee talked about this a little bit. But as I told you before, I personally spend a lot of time talking to financial services companies, and this is the number one thing they talk about, is trust. And here's why. It's this simple. Because if you lose trust, you lose a customer, which means you're losing revenue, which means you're losing market share. And if you're running a public company and you're losing market share and revenue, you have a big problem. So trust is the number one thing that most companies are worried about, especially a financial services company. A bit of a famous quote, but it's true in any country. Trust takes a long time to build. It's easy to lose and very difficult to repair. Now, if we look at the financial system, why is the financial system under attack? Here's why. Because if you look at the US economy, it's about $18 trillion per year. That's the size of the US economy. But now look at this. Every day, not every year, every day, about $13 trillion US goes through the global banking system electronically. Think about that. $13 trillion gets moved electronically every day. That is why cyber criminals are after the financial network, is because they can look at the demographics of the world, they can see where the money is, and they can attack the infrastructure associated with that. Earlier when I showed you critical infrastructure being gas, water, pipelines, airports, I think we would agree we need to update our definition of critical infrastructure. And we need to move beyond electrical, transportation, water, things like that, because it's the financial services network that is the critical infrastructure. That is the critical part that everyone needs to protect. And it's because money has become digital. And I don't mean Bitcoin. Most people don't even know what Bitcoin is or how to use it. But I will tell you, if everyone in this room pulled out their Samsung or Apple device and you logged into your bank, right? Whether it's Kookmin Bank or Wori Bank or anyone in Korea, if you logged into your bank and it said $0, everyone in this room would get up and leave. Even if nothing had happened, if the digital system told you you had no money in your bank, everyone in this room would get up and leave to figure out what had happened. Because our money is now digital, it's not physical. So my goal in any presentation is hopefully you will take away some things and you will learn a couple of things, because this presentation has been built upon months and months of conversations with leaders all across Asia Pacific. So I'd like to share with you some action you can take when you leave here today. Right? This is what we call the 5 no's of security. We believe all companies should know the value of their data, your intellectual property. You should know the value of it. You should know who has access to your data. Sounds simple, right? It's not. Companies do not know who has access to their data. You should also know where your data is stored. Again, sounds simple. It's not. You would be surprised where your data is stored. You should know who is responsible for protecting your data. Do you know everyone in your IT department? Do you have a chief security officer? And last, do you know how your data is actually protected? I'm not here today to fix all of this, but I'm telling you, you should think about this. These questions can help guide you and what your company does as you take this journey to securing your digital life and your cybersecurity assets. Now, Renee touched on a couple things, and I want to reinforce them. I call this cyber hygiene, right? We believe in a prevention automated approach, right? And I refer back to something from history called the Enigma machine in Germany. The only way people beat this machine is by developing another machine. Now, when I talk to customers in China and India specifically, there has been a legacy belief that we'll just throw more people at the problem because people are cheap. It doesn't matter how cheap people are, you cannot solve this problem with people. As Renee talked about, this is a mathematical problem, and it's all about computational power. That is how you do prevention. Now, that's the technology side. Here's another thing Renee talked about, our Cyber Threat Alliance. The one thing that I'll point out, Renee showed you the companies that we're working with, Fortinet, Symantec, Intel Security. But what he didn't say, those are our competitors. We have openly stated we will share information with our competitors because it's in the best interest of you as a customer. That's why we started this. And as Renee said, this is going to be even bigger. It actually is already much bigger, but we have some great announcements coming behind this. Last, don't underestimate user education and awareness. It doesn't cost anything. This is not a product. Teaching your people not to click on an email that they don't know who it's from, you have to educate them to do that. A product does not solve user education and awareness. We also help by having education in universities and trying to educate the younger generations before they go into the workforce. I encourage you to do the same. Please educate your people. It's not a product. I'm not selling you something. Educate them. Now, in case you don't know exactly what we mean by a prevention-based platform, I want to show you something. Because most people think this is our business, a next-generation firewall, which 10 years ago, this was our business. But it's not anymore. This is just part of our platform. Because attacks aren't just coming in from here. Attacks are coming in on USB drives, from contractors, from everywhere, right? So we've had to move our intelligence to the cloud so that we can do these dynamic updates, like Renee talked about. No human intervention, right? Because we have over 31,000 customers. I think it's over 35,000 customers now. And all of them are connected to our cloud, and you can leverage the intelligence from all of our customers. Now, it's not just here. Threats are happening on the endpoint, right? And so we're taking a detailed look at the endpoint and trying to figure out how we best protect you there, and we've done that with a couple of unique products, which is Traps and Global Protect. Now, the interesting part here is that these products are also connected to the cloud, leveraging our services in the cloud. But what customers started doing is asking us, can I have access to the data in your cloud? And the answer is yes. And we've created some services like Autofocus and Aperture. Autofocus allows you to actually access all of the data in our cloud and see what's happening and do research on threats. And Aperture is allowing you to analyze your SaaS infrastructure. Office 365, Google Drive, all of your outsourcing into the cloud, how do you scan that? That's where we're helping. Now, you could look at this and say, hey, some other competitors claim this too. No competitor continually updates this network every 5 minutes. Nobody. This is what we have spent an incredible amount of money perfecting, is how to do all of this and update it in an automated way every 5 minutes. No customer can find any other vendor that can do that, right? We are unique and differentiated in this regard. So in our last couple of minutes, I'll share with you another example from a report. This was done in May. Look at some of the numbers here, right? Over 200,000 vulnerabilities, 369 applications on this network. This is an example of a report we delivered to a customer. And what did we find? A lot of Dropbox, FTP, a lot of SSL, almost 800 gigabytes of SSL traffic. Ask yourself, if you're protecting your network and you have 800 gigs of SSL traffic, what is happening inside of that traffic? It's encrypted. Do you have a policy to decrypt that? Right? How can you protect against an attack if you can't see it? So think about the encrypted traffic in your network and what your policy is to protect on that. Right? Think about the SaaS applications in use on your network. And then watch what people are doing. More importantly, watch what they're trying to hide from you. Here's a product called UltraSurf and another product called FreeGate. Anybody know what these products are? I do, because I researched them. Both of these products were developed in China to bypass the Great Firewall of China. Now these products are in use around the world to hide what employees are doing at their company. So we were able to go in and talk to the CIO of a company and the CSO and show them that they have employees on their network that are hiding traffic from their bosses. Think about that. Think about the conversation that led to, and then what happened internally at that company. A report that is done in 7 days can produce this kind of information. Here's another great example of over 100 gigs of traffic just for video. Video is not the main application that this business generates revenue from. And this is what I'll leave you with. We will also tell you the URL categories at a company. Look at the top category. Adult websites, right? This is on a company network. How about this? Shareware and freeware. Do you even know what people are downloading for applications on your network? You've got things like dating. This is all from a customer's network, right? We see the same thing again and again in every country, at every customer, because people have not taken the appropriate action. So if you want this kind of visibility in your network to protect what is going on, we do this for free in 7 days. With that, I want to thank you for hosting me in Korea. Thank you to Renee for coming here. I look forward to talking with everyone at Break. 감사합니다.